So I've been thinking about what would be the most broken champion in the mid lane. And I got this idea when we talked on my stream. We talked about how Jarvan has a positive win rate versus almost everyone, and Neela as well. And we were kind of thinking. And I think this guy is it. So, very interestingly enough, AKSHAN has the best versus all win rate in the mid lane, although not having the best win rates. Of course, there are some champions that can be really difficult to play against for him, but he also has probably he has the most favorable matchup versus a lot of champions, and generally is a very, very strong champion, as he is a kind of unique champion, right? Him and Tristana, some would argue Lucian as well, but that's been it's been a while since that has been the case. These champions, they do have very, very extreme trading patterns and very, very interesting ways of interacting with the mid lane, right? As, of course, their wave clear comes for free, which usually is not a concept in the mid lane. If you think about most of the champions that have massive wave clear, you think of either champions that have very, very high mana costs associated with it, or reasonable mana costs, right? That allow them to push not that many waves. Or you have champions like, for example, the Yasuo, right? That have a very committal kind of play style that then get the benefit of being able to push waves very quickly. Qiyana as well. However, Qiyana is kind of in both boats, has very high mana costs as well. And so they also have quite the downsides to them, where here, of course, the wave clear comes from the fact that we're scaling with AD, which is allows us to have very high consistent damage. Now, high consistent damage, or above average consistent damage, is kind of a problem in mid lane, because a lot of champions are bursty in nature, so you tend to just lose to short trades. Now, there are different ways to kind of make up for that, right? Yasuo has the ability to dash through every single minion in a wave. Irelia, same thing. Although Irelia damage, you could argue, is also very front-loaded. Tristana, very front-loaded damage. And AKSHAN does not have the most front-loaded damage, right? If you think about any other ranged champion, you have the Tristana, you have the Lucian, all of those have pretty front-loaded damage, right? AKSHAN, not really. So where does the damage and where does the win rate come from? Well, number one, of course, he has a really, really strong passive on the W. And this might seem like I'm talking about the Resurrect, which Resurrect for sure, very good and very useful tool. However, what makes AKSHAN so ridiculously strong is his W invisibility. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit because I've heard chatters just not understand this when people talk about AKSHAN, and talk like when you had people complain about, you know, how annoying it is to face against AKSHAN. I think it was Yankos, I think, said that. And it's because you permanently have to understand, right? Right now, a wave is crashing into the mid lane. Right now, we found AKSHAN because there's a control ward on the red buff, right? But the enemy team, whenever anything happens and AKSHAN is not visible, they don't know where he is. Now here, he's being tracked very, very well, right? Ahri has the gank kind of pre-figured out. But, as you can see, AKSHAN ends up winning this more or less. Might lose it to the Pyke, but a beautiful flash will get him out of there. The thing here is that this roam was probably the weakest roam an AKSHAN can get, because he was spotted out. He roamed on a very poor timing, and Ahri, seeing him on a control ward, was able to help out and kind of predict that he would come down there, right? But what makes AKSHAN so annoying is that he can go invis, And you kind of have to guess because you can't really track him with wards. And that is an issue because versus other roamers like the Fizz, like the Talon, you can understand what their pathing should be. And most of the time, you can't really deal with it. And, or you can kind of deal with it, right? And understand where he is on the map and so on. Now, this doesn't really matter in lower elos. And this is, I think, why this point is very important is for us, you know, lower elo players, and I consider everyone below masters to be that. It doesn't really matter because, I mean, I play diamond games, right? Fuckers still don't react to like a person roaming and shit. So, you know, it's a little bit rough. It's a little bit of an unfortunate situation, but the problem with it is that AKSHAN very strong for very different reasons in very different elos, right? So in higher elos, he's ridiculous for the fact that he can just go in Viz, right? Just hover towards sides, and it's just kind of a question mark because for the mid laner, also, you will have to understand that, yeah, he could be roaming right now, right? But if you use your spells on the wave and he was just hugging aside, then he comes in, he can swing on you and he can just kill you, right? So this then results in this kind of like fork, a chess style fork, as you might think, where, you know, he just kind of baits out your spells, and now the question mark is, okay, is he roaming next time he disappears, or is he doing the same thing again? And you can't really push because that, right? But you also kind of need to push because what if he shows up bottom and you don't get a plate for it to trade it off, right? Then your team just loses resources for no reason. So very difficult. Now in pro play, this is a non-issue, right? Because in pro play, this is very easily played around. However, not so in solo queue, right? Because people can't talk to each other. So, and also, I mean, the practice together is just missing, right? Now, I would assume that in a couple of years, this will be a thing in solo queue, as I think that high elo solo queue is getting better at a rate right now, getting better at a rate that is very, very high. But I still think that AKSHAN is probably still going to be pretty abusive just by being able to ignore some of those game mechanics, right? The next thing is, of course, his mobility spell being reset by kills. This is something that every good freaking solo queue champion has. Look at Viego, look at Katarina. Although Viego currently has a 48% win rate, so much for that. But, you know, it's me whining. But I think that the thing is that this reset, together with the fact that he gets the resurrections from kills, I think that makes him a little bit toxic, right? I think that if he had one of those mechanics, it would kind of be okay. But with both of those mechanics, he just has a little bit too many options. Now, I personally am a huge AKSHAN fan. I love playing AKSHAN. Before AKSHAN came out, I was playing Vayne mid lane. And I was having fun with it. But AKSHAN came out, and it's just like so much more fun than Vayne. Because you can just use this. You go into hiding for a second, and then you just roll them down. And, you know, it just works out well. So he was always my AD champion for mid lane whenever, you know, I was having like triple or was afraid to have triple AP topside. He was always my champion. He's very easy to play. To me, felt very plug and play, right? Of course, there are some plays that a advanced AKSHAN player can make that you can't. But other than that, AKSHAN, very, very simple. Once you understand wave control, you understand timings, you understand kind of how the minimap works, then he's just very strong, right? And things like this is unnerving for the enemy team, right? Seeing no one mid lane is just unnerving. The wave is there, no one's mid lane. That means we got to play back a little bit, right? And that's annoying. Right, and then the other thing is like he kind of has that Evelyn mechanic, built into a mid laner, which is kind of not fun, right? Because look at any other hard roamers, Fizz, Kiana, they're all visible. When they are in mid lane, they are visible. When they are on a ward, they are visible. He's not. The price he pays is he has lower movement speed. Most of the time, he has lower movement speed in that W. But, and this is the other thing, through the passive, he then, once a play happens, is also really good at following. So, versus those hard pushing, runaway freaking mid laners like Kiana that love to dodge the laning phase that they can't win, which AKSHAN is a very difficult laning phase for them. Because he has that dominant laning phase, right? They try to escape, they get a kill somewhere, AKSHAN can follow, can just, roll that up, resurrect his whole entire team. The fucking minion wave was in their favor, now it's not anymore. Very, very annoying to play against. So, TLDR, which champions are really good against AKSHAN? I mean, Ahri definitely one of them, for sure. Ahri is also probably the best versus all champion, right? Kind of just has a weakness versus stuff like Xerath and stuff, but, still. Most definitely a playable matchup for sure. I think Ahri is one of the best. Then I would assume that Galio is really strong. Not necessarily in laning phase, winning laning phase, but just in the way that he kind of plays the game and AKSHAN plays the game, right? And I would assume that some others are there as well. I've always had a good time with Victor, but then again, like Victor also has the benefit of just being a... Victor's kind of ridiculous once you get like pretty good at him. Also doesn't really have losing matchups once you understand how to like play him from behind. So yeah, AKSHAN. The only thing that I hate about AKSHAN's is if you play versus a good AKSHAN, he just is able to open up the game so quickly. It feels like a Pantheon, but even more scary because again, right? Pantheon. If you know he's leaving your lane, most likely he's left your lane. AKSHAN can be sitting right next to you. So yeah. And the builds with AKSHAN. I mean, right now the builds are kind of all over the place. Rageblade very strong. Stormrazor still very, very strong on the patch. This is played on previous patch where Stormrazor and Youmuu's were absolutely broken, which is why we're going to see Youmuu's and Stormrazor here. These are very, very strong items, and this kind of leads us to the next point of AKSHAN just having a lot of item mobility, right? If you think about it, AKSHAN can go crit, he can go lethality, he has that solo lane 80 carry, so he can go lethality, and he will get the benefit from level scaling and stuff. He gets the benefit from the burst. He can build into a more sustained type of playstyle. And he can even go a reasonably off-tank build that I used to play sometimes with Jak'Sho. It sounds super int, but there are some matchups, like Kiana, where if the Kiana gets ahead, what you do is you go Blade of the Rune King, and then you get a Jak'Sho, which back then, you then get a Rageblade. And that's it, right? So that used to be the build. Again, I stopped playing on my Diamond account before this patch hit, so I can't really tell you about these items. As right now, I'm working on my Viego Min, which is hard stuck in, well, currently like somewhere platinum. And my thing is this, right? I think that AKSHAN just has a lot of things going for him, but he's never going to show up in competitive because so many of his strengths kind of don't really matter in competitive, right? The reset from his E, the W, both of those don't really matter. And I think that inherently makes him... I think it's good to have these solo queue only champions, don't get me wrong. But I think that inherently just kind of makes him a weird champion, because if he shows up in competitive, it's going to be an issue. Because if he shows up in competitive, that's going to be because he can play every lane. Or that's going to be because he just has like overtuned numbers, he is never going to show up in competitive just on the merit of what he provides for a team comp, because what does he provide for a team comp? The Resurrect, if he kills everyone, I mean, like, you know, maybe there are like 2, maybe 3 champions that work well with that. Like a Scion, for example, right? That works well with that playstyle and stuff. But like, I don't know, man. I really don't feel that. So yeah. One thing that I find very weird, and I've seen this before, is that a lot of high elo AKSHANs tend to never play side lane, which I don't understand, because I was like the biggest, like whenever I would get AKSHAN, but basically playing versus good players, laning phase was kind of meh. And then the side lane happened, and you could just ruin games from the side lane, because you can push side lane, you can win a lot of side lane matchups, you can invade the jungler, you can set up really good timings in the side lane, right? You can like set up a pushing wave, make a play mid lane, and so return back to a bounced wave, for example, things like that. Or, you know, just set up a pushing lane, set the lane up so that it kind of is in the situation that you see it right now with the Shen, but on your side, right? And then, so where it's like barely over the middle, and then just run down people that go there, right? Or whatever else you have, right? Catch out the supports on the roams and stuff, as he just has so many things he can do. And of course, in this area right here, he is probably weakest. The strongest he is in the straight parts of the lane where the minions move in a direct line, right? Where they don't like curve. Because the direct line, you just throw your Q in and you just insta clear that wave, right? So really, really strong, and has a lot of options. And, you know, you can also kill people in the jungle the easiest with your ultimate, right? That's kind of the place where you can kill people very, very easily. So yeah, generally, absolutely love the side lane. We've seen this guy side lane just a little bit now. And it's very weird, but people tend to go for this like Zoe kind of playstyle. And I believe it is because you don't really want to, you want to accelerate the game as much as possible, which means you want to set up for a situation where you and the enemy team are losing resources, but you're gaining incrementally more, because eventually AKSHAN runs into the problem of being very low range and very predictable. And that in late game is a absolute curse. Now here, beautiful play by the enemy team. Chains to seeing here. Illegally he gets out, but this is just his team being too strong. And then this is the problem if an AKSHAN gets out, right? He manages to kill someone. If you're really unlucky, he even revives someone with it, and the game's just over off of that. One good revive can definitely win you the game. So, yeah. AKSHAN, a little bit of a question mark champion. And this guy, I find it very interesting. This guy is building Youmu's, because, I mean, AKSHAN has a 4-second burst window in a way. But then versus most champions, it's gonna take him a little bit longer to kill them. So I find it a very interesting choice to go Youmu's. Right now, Youmu's was so broken on that patch that it's kind of like a no-brainer, right? Because you just gain so much damage from it that it's just completely illegal. And, you know, you manage to kill people in 4 seconds. And also, of course, the movement speed, very, very good on him. As he very good, actually, at sniffing out the potential hike there. One thing that kind of blew my mind when I played AKSHAN recently again is they changed his Q. His Q doesn't reveal hidden units anymore. And that was one of my favorite parts about AKSHAN, is I loved having this champion that has a skill shot that is able to reveal invisible units. Because that meant to me, like if I'm playing versus an Akali, all of a sudden her shroud just isn't as broken against me anymore as it usually is against an auto attacker. But of course, they had to change it, because that's apparently the part about him that is broken, which I entirely disagree with. I think that part is actually very good to have in the game a little bit, you know? Because that's something that makes him unique, right? No other champion can really do that, except champions like Karma and you know, these like binding champions, right? Karma, Morgana. It's probably another champion that I'm forgetting that is able to put chains on people and bind them over time as well. But yeah, and here you can see it, right? Look at the amount of damage AKSHAN is capable like of dishing out, right? Very, very high damage. He is pretty much on level with the Shen. I mean, he's only one level ahead, which, you know, with the lethality is made quite worthwhile, but still. And item wise, he is quite far ahead. That so much you have to say. For sure. And yeah, I think AKSHAN just very, very nice plug and play kind of AD mid that doesn't have anything crazy, doesn't have any crazy combos. Of course, there's some stuff that you can do, right? There are some bugs with his E that you can abuse and stuff like that. But generally, he's not. I wouldn't even. I would say he's like much more simple than someone like Lucian, right? And yeah. So generally, pretty big fan of him, as he also brings a little bit more resistance to the table than other AD carries in the mid lane, which can, you know, make him a little bit more stable in the situations. And again, has very, very high build variety, which is most of the time is a good thing, right? Until you obsess with builds and kind of, you know, ignore fundamentals of the game. Something that I might be doing or not be doing from time to time. And yeah, this of course is the freaking AKSHAN special. Takes 2 tower shots every single swing though. So yeah, eventually goes down. But yeah, AKSHAN also with the rapid fire cannon, immensely mean. People underestimate how strong it is because it gives him the double shot passive, right? And that one is very, very effective against people, because that way he can hit a long range Q and then trade in for a combo which does massive damage later on. So very, very good combo. Again, if you were playing him today, probably not build Youmuu's Gustblade. There are some games where it's okay, but I think it's a niche item. Most of the cases, you're gonna be happier with a Gale Force or a Rage Blade. I think Gale Force is really, really nice with the build that he's running right now. Just replace the Youmuu's with Gale Force because it gives you crit, which is always good, right? And if you have crit, it's a pretty nice thing to have. With the rapid fire cannon, you can go for incredible bursts, kind of like a semi-Lucian Nami type deal, right? And that works out really well with how his passive works, where, you know, you get an assassination onto a target that is marked, that is a high priority target. That's a good type. Very good flash here out of the AKSHAN. We'll see if the currently the red team has 3 members in that area. As here he is just sneaking around looking for maybe the Severe here. Oh, he gets one auto attack. Will take down the Severe. Very nice. Very nice as Zeri pushes the side lane. I mean, this game is kind of over, right? This game's been over for a while now. Ahri holding on very well though, I have to say. Look at her items. Look at her farm. Definitely playing the side lane pretty well. Okay. But yeah, I mean, we're just all kind of useless, huh? Kindred, you would think is pretty good against AKSHAN, but I find that she's not that good because AKSHAN enters fights pretty late. You know, it is what it is. And I mean, yeah, very, very solid game, very good, very fun to watch. I always like AKSHAN because AKSHAN also is one of those Chinese champions. With Chinese, I mean, this is like a champion that's fucking insane on the Chinese server because it's just perma brawling, super aggressive, a lot of chaos, insane 2v2 potential, right? And just a lot of like ways to impact the game, to create chaos, to make the game end faster. And these, let's be honest, guys, these are the games that we want to watch, right? We don't want to watch like a 50-minute snooze fest on Victor. which is, by the way, the reason that I swapped to playing Viego mid lane instead of playing Victor, because it was just snooze fest.